Three things catch attention immediately when disaster strikes: the roar of flames, the silence after destruction, and the voices of those who lived through it. This video begins not with statistics or official declarations, but with the stories of real Texans who have faced the terrifying reality of wildfire. Their words, their choices, and their fears tell us more than numbers ever could. Imagine a quiet afternoon in rural Palo Pinto County. The sun is blazing overhead, and the air feels unusually dry. For weeks, there has been no rain. Farmers watch their fields turn brittle, the soil cracking as if the earth itself is thirsty. Then, without warning, a spark, whether from a downed power line, a passing vehicle, or a simple accident, becomes something far larger. Within minutes, flames race across the grass, feeding on the dryness of the land. Entire neighborhoods are suddenly under threat. Families grab what they can: photographs, documents, pets, before rushing to safety. This is the human side of the Texas wildfire crisis, and it is where our story begins. One of the most heart-wrenching accounts comes from a retired schoolteacher named Marlene, who had lived in the same farmhouse for more than 40 years. In her voice, you can hear both sorrow and resilience as she describes the night her world changed. The fire moved so fast that by the time she saw smoke in the distance, it was already too late to save her home. She escaped with her 2 dogs, leaving behind everything else. "It's not just things," she said. "It's a lifetime. Every corner of that house had memories." Her experience is not unique. Thousands of Texans have faced similar choices: what to take, what to leave, and how to keep loved ones alive. Wildfires do not discriminate. They consume the land of the wealthy ranch owner and the modest trailer of a young family alike. For many, insurance is either out of reach or insufficient. The aftermath becomes more than a natural disaster, it becomes a financial disaster. Consider the Garcia family in Eastland County. They had finally paid off their modest home just 2 years before the blaze. When the fire swept through, they lost not only their property, but also the stability they had worked decades to achieve. Relief programs exist, but paperwork is slow, and the needs are urgent. They are now living in temporary housing, unsure of when or if they will rebuild. Beyond the physical losses, there is the invisible wound: trauma. Children who wake at night remembering the glow of fire outside their windows. Elderly residents who no longer feel safe in the homes they rebuilt. Firefighters themselves carry scars, both physical and emotional, from battling blazes under punishing heat. These personal costs rarely make headlines, yet they shape communities long after the flames are gone. The human toll extends to livelihoods as well. Farmers and ranchers who depend on the land for income often lose everything in a matter of hours. Cattle, trapped in fields, are sometimes overtaken by the flames before they can be moved. Hay barns and feed supplies are reduced to ash, creating ripple effects that last for years. For a rancher like David, whose family has raised cattle in central Texas for generations, the fire of 2025 was more than an economic blow. It felt like an assault on his heritage. "It's not just cattle," he explained. "It's who we are. When the land burns, part of our history burns with it." Communities, however, often reveal their strongest qualities during these darkest times. Churches transform into shelters. Volunteers distribute water and clothing. Local restaurants cook meals for evacuees and first responders. Stories of neighbors saving each other, sometimes at great personal risk, remind us that resilience is not an abstract concept. It is lived out in everyday acts of kindness. Yet even in resilience, there is exhaustion. When disasters strike again and again, communities struggle to recover fully before the next crisis arrives. In 2011, 2017, and 2022, Texans faced major wildfires. Each time they rebuilt. But with the 2025 disaster declaration, many feel that the cycle may be accelerating, giving less time for recovery and healing. The constant pressure weighs heavily, especially on those who have already lost more than once. The question then arises, how much can a community endure before it fractures? Sociologists studying disaster recovery often warn that repeated shocks weaken the very bonds that make resilience possible. When young families move away after losing their homes, small towns lose future generations. Schools close, businesses struggle. Over time, the wildfire's impact is not just visible in burned land, but in empty main streets and fading traditions. Still, there are reasons for hope. Federal and state assistance programs, though often criticized for delays, provide lifelines. Non-profits step in to fill gaps, offering both immediate aid and long-term support. Mental health organizations are beginning to focus on trauma care for wildfire survivors, recognizing that rebuilding lives requires more than bricks and mortar. And new technologies, like satellite-based early warning systems and community fire mapping tools, promise to give residents more time to act when danger approaches. This first part of our video series is about putting faces and names to a crisis, often reduced to headlines. It is about understanding that behind every acre burned lies a human story of loss, survival, and resilience. These stories matter because they remind us why wildfire prevention, response, and recovery are not just technical issues, they are human priorities. As we move deeper into this series, we will explore the broader picture, the environmental conditions fueling these fires, the political decisions shaping preparedness, and the long-term strategies that could alter the future. But for now, we must sit with the voices of those who have lived through the flames, because in their words lies the true measure of what is at stake. When people hear about disasters, the first instinct is often to look for numbers. How many acres burned? How many homes destroyed? How many people displaced? Numbers are important. They give us scope. They allow comparisons. But they can never capture the texture of lived experience. What it feels like to smell smoke in your living room, to pack your life into the backseat of a car, or to wonder if you'll ever see your house again. This section of our story looks deeper into those experiences, giving us a glimpse of what families endured as the Texas wildfires swept across their towns. Take the Johnson family in Taylor County. On the day the fire broke out near their property, they were enjoying a late summer barbecue. The wind was steady, but nothing unusual. Then a neighbor rushed over, shouting that flames were visible just beyond the tree line. In the short time it took to gather their children and pets, the fire leapt closer, driven by winds that turned sparks into a rolling wall of flame. By the time they pulled out of their driveway, heat from the blaze was already cracking the paint on their garage. They would return days later to find nothing but scorched earth where their home once stood. The Johnson story is one of many that highlight the terrifying speed of wildfire. Experts often explain that a grass fire in Texas can spread at nearly 15 miles per hour under the right conditions. That's faster than a person can run, faster than most people can comprehend. For families, the sudden shift from ordinary life to survival mode is disorienting, almost surreal. One moment you're cooking hamburgers, the next you're fleeing for your lives. In Eastland, a young couple named Brianna and Marcus faced a different kind of loss. They managed to escape with their 3 children, but their small family farm did not. Marcus had grown up raising goats and chickens, tending to the land alongside his father. In the fire's aftermath, he walked through the charred remains of their barn, tears streaming down his face as he searched for survivors among his animals. "I know they're just animals to some people," he said quietly, "but they were our livelihood, our companions. Every one of them had a name." For him, the fire wasn't just about burned buildings, it was about the loss of a way of life, the severing of ties that stretched back generations. Beyond individual families, entire communities were transformed in hours. Schools became makeshift shelters, gymnasiums filled with cots and blankets. Strangers thrown together by necessity became allies in survival. Volunteers brought food, water, and medical supplies, often driving for hours to reach evacuation centers. Churches opened their doors, sometimes housing dozens of people who had nowhere else to go. These scenes revealed the best of human solidarity in the face of overwhelming tragedy. Yet the strain of displacement is real. Families crowded into shelters struggle with privacy, with stress, with the uncertainty of not knowing when or if they can return home. For children, routines are disrupted. Homework is abandoned, friendships scattered, and the comfort of familiar spaces replaced with the harshness of fluorescent lights and communal sleeping arrangements. Teachers report that many students show signs of anxiety, nightmares, sudden outbursts, difficulty concentrating. Trauma lingers long after the flames die down. Firefighters, too, carry heavy burdens. Texas fire crews, already stretched thin, worked around the clock to contain multiple blazes simultaneously. Many came from volunteer departments, men and women who juggle full-time jobs with the responsibility of protecting their communities. They returned from fire lines with soot covering their faces, their eyes bloodshot from smoke, their bodies exhausted from days without rest. While the public hails them as heroes, and rightly so, the emotional cost of seeing devastation up close, day after day, often goes unnoticed. Some firefighters admit they cry silently in their trucks after shifts, mourning the homes they couldn't save. Medical professionals have also witnessed the toll firsthand. Emergency rooms filled with patients suffering from burns, smoke inhalation, and dehydration. Elderly residents, already vulnerable to heat stress, collapsed while evacuating. Doctors and nurses describe scenes of chaos, but also of quiet courage. Strangers holding hands in waiting rooms, children comforting parents, and volunteers bringing comfort to those who had lost everything. The wildfires also exposed long-standing inequalities. Wealthier families often had insurance policies, backup savings, and second homes to retreat to. Poorer households, by contrast, found themselves without options. For some, losing a modest trailer or rental home meant starting from zero. Without strong financial safety nets, recovery feels impossible. Aid programs exist, but bureaucracy slows their reach. People are forced to rely on neighbors, non-profits, and sheer determination to survive. These disparities underline the uncomfortable truth. Disasters may strike indiscriminately, but recovery is rarely equal. The emotional stories of survivors also raise a broader question about resilience. How much suffering can people endure before something breaks? Psychologists who study disaster survivors warn that unresolved trauma can shape entire communities for decades. Children who live through evacuation may grow up with deep anxieties around fire, weather, or even loud noises. Adults may struggle with depression or post-traumatic stress, haunted by images of burning homes. Healing requires more than rebuilding structures. It demands long-term attention to mental health and community support. At the same time, resilience shines through in unexpected ways. In one shelter, a group of children began drawing pictures of their lost homes, turning grief into creativity. In another, a retired musician brought his guitar and played songs each evening, lifting spirits and reminding everyone that joy can survive even in hardship. These moments don't erase the pain, but they offer a glimpse of hope, a signal that the human spirit is not so easily extinguished. This part of the story reminds us that the Texas wildfires are not only an environmental or political issue, they are profoundly human. They reveal the fragility of our lives, the strength of our bonds, and the uneven paths of recovery. Every face in the crowd, every voice in the shelter tells us something vital about who we are and how we endure. When a wildfire spreads across dry land, it does not just consume brush, trees, and grasslands, it consumes lives as well. Every fire season in Texas brings with it not only the visible destruction of structures, but also invisible scars carried by the people who live through it. The 2025 wildfires have been no exception. Families across multiple counties have been forced to flee their homes, leaving behind everything they own, sometimes with only minutes of warning. In these frantic evacuations, people often lose not just possessions, but treasured family memories, photo albums, heirlooms, and the irreplaceable tokens of their personal histories. The trauma of watching flames approach your house and knowing there is nothing you can do to stop it leaves a deep emotional imprint. Survivors of past Texas fires have compared it to watching your life erased in real time. That reality is repeating once again. Local reports from affected communities reveal heartbreaking stories. Parents are packing children into cars, hoping they can get out before roads are blocked. Elderly residents are sometimes unable to evacuate quickly, relying on neighbors or first responders to carry them to safety. Shelters in nearby towns are filling with displaced families, many of whom have no clear sense of when or if they will ever return home. The Red Cross and local churches have set up emergency housing, but the strain is immense. Displacement is not only physical, it fractures the sense of belonging and community. People who once felt secure in their neighborhoods suddenly find themselves adrift, wondering how they will rebuild. The human toll extends beyond those who lose their homes. Farmers and ranchers across Texas face devastating losses when fire sweeps across their land. In some counties, Cattle herds have been trapped, pastures scorched, and barns reduced to ash. For small family-owned operations, the destruction of grazing land or feed supplies can wipe out years of hard work in a single afternoon. The emotional connection that ranchers and farmers have with their land deepens the pain of these losses. It is not just economic damage, but a blow to identity, heritage, and livelihood. Many of these communities have endured droughts, floods, and storms, but wildfire brings a particularly cruel form of devastation. Fast, unpredictable, and merciless. Frontline responders face a different kind of toll. Firefighters from across the state are battling these wildfires under extreme conditions. Temperatures soar, protective gear grows unbearably heavy, and smoke fills their lungs. They work grueling shifts with little rest, driven by the urgency of saving lives and property. Tragically, every major wildfire season in Texas comes with injuries and sometimes fatalities among first responders. These men and women carry the weight of not only their physical exhaustion, but also the emotional burden of witnessing tragedy firsthand. They see homes collapse, families grieving, and landscapes transformed into wastelands of ash. For many, these images linger long after the fire has been contained. Mental health is as often overlooked in disaster coverage, but the stress, anxiety, and trauma triggered by wildfires can last years. Children in particular are vulnerable to the psychological aftershocks. Young students who evacuate from their homes suddenly must navigate new schools, temporary shelters, and the fear that another fire could erupt. Adults, too, often face post-traumatic stress, nightmares of flames, a constant sense of alertness, or panic every time they smell smoke in the air. Studies from past Texas wildfires show that these mental health challenges often persist long after homes have been rebuilt, creating a hidden crisis in communities already struggling to recover. Economically, the costs pile up quickly. For families who lose their houses, insurance payouts are rarely enough to cover the full expense of rebuilding. Renters may have even fewer options, as temporary housing shortages drive up costs in nearby cities. Small businesses in fire-affected areas suffer when employees evacuate, customers disappear, and supply chains are disrupted. A grocery store, for example, may close for weeks, leaving the community without access to basic necessities. Gas stations, hardware stores, and restaurants may be destroyed or forced to shut down temporarily, further deepening the sense of loss. The ripple effect of these economic challenges spreads far beyond the fire's immediate path, impacting entire regions. Amid this destruction, however, the human spirit of resilience emerges. Communities across Texas are known for pulling together during disasters, and the 2025 wildfires have sparked acts of kindness and solidarity. Volunteers are donating clothing, food, and supplies to shelters. Strangers are opening their homes to evacuees. Social media groups have become lifelines for families seeking missing pets, organizing fundraising campaigns, and coordinating relief efforts. These moments of compassion do not erase the trauma, but they remind survivors that they are not alone. Hope, though fragile, often rises from the ashes. The human toll of Texas wildfires cannot be measured in statistics alone. It is written in the tears of a family watching their home burn, the exhaustion etched on a firefighter's face, the silence of a rancher standing in a blackened field. It is present in the fear children feel when they ask their parents if the fire will come back. Numbers can tell us how many acres burned or how many houses were destroyed, but they cannot fully capture the pain of those who lived through it. Behind every data point is a human story, complex, heartbreaking, and deeply personal. As we continue to analyze this disaster, it is critical to remember that recovery will not be immediate. Families will struggle for months or years to rebuild. Communities will mourn what was lost, even as they begin again. And every wildfire leaves behind lessons about preparedness, resilience, and the need for stronger systems to protect those most vulnerable. Texas will endure, as it always does, but the scars of 2025 will remain part of its history and its people. The struggle against wildfires in Texas is not only a battle with flames, but also a battle against time. Every passing hour without containment brings new destruction, new evacuations, and a heavier toll on both human lives and the natural environment. As helicopters circle above with giant water buckets and bulldozers carve fire breaks through dry brush, local officials are confronted with a stark reality. They are often outpaced by the sheer scale of the blaze. Fire crews from across the state and even beyond converge to fight shoulder to shoulder, but in many instances, the flames spread faster than they can be subdued. The wildfires leap across highways, jump over containment lines, and roar through rural communities, leaving behind blackened earth and collapsed structures. For those who live in small towns scattered across the Texas plains, the flames arrive with terrifying speed, often leaving little time to grab essentials before evacuating. The human dimension of this crisis is as critical as the environmental destruction. Families are displaced, not knowing when or if they will return to their homes. Children ask questions that parents cannot answer, while elderly residents face the harsh challenge of leaving places where they've spent a lifetime. Shelters across affected counties open their doors to evacuees, offering cots, meals, and a small sense of stability amid the chaos. Volunteers from churches, community organizations, and charities rally together to provide support, from clothing and bottled water to emotional comfort. Yet, as much as these acts of kindness shine a light in the darkness, the underlying fear remains heavy. What if the fires continue unchecked? What if there is nothing left to return to? These questions underscore the depth of the tragedy for Texans caught in the path of destruction. Beyond the immediate suffering, there is a mounting economic cost. Agriculture, one of the lifelines of Texas, suffers severely as flames consume pastures and threaten livestock. Ranchers scramble to move cattle out of danger zones, often losing animals in the process. Crops already struggling under drought conditions are reduced to ashes in minutes, wiping out entire harvests that families depend upon for income. Small businesses, particularly those in rural communities, face devastation as their shops, warehouses, and customer bases vanish overnight. The ripple effect extends to supply chains, local economies, and even state revenue, making the wildfires not just an environmental disaster, but also an economic one, with long-term consequences. Insurance claims pile up, and yet not everything is insurable. For many, the cost of rebuilding far outweighs what little support they might receive, pushing families into financial despair. The environmental toll is equally catastrophic. Texas is home to diverse ecosystems, from rolling plains and pine forests to wetlands and deserts, all of which face threats from the encroaching flames. Wildlife habitats are destroyed, forcing animals to flee or perish in the inferno. Species already endangered are pushed closer to extinction. Soil becomes scorched, losing nutrients and resilience, making it harder for vegetation to regrow. In some cases, the intense heat alters the very composition of the ground, leading to long-term erosion problems. Water quality also comes under threat, as ash and debris flow into rivers, creeks, and reservoirs, contaminating supplies relied upon by both people and wildlife. Scientists warn that such widespread damage may take years, even decades, to recover from, if recovery is possible at all. The fires are not merely events of destruction. They reshape the land itself in profound and often irreversible ways. At the same time, there are the invisible but no less severe health impacts on communities. The thick smoke from these wildfires spreads far beyond the flames themselves, carried by winds across cities and counties. This smoke contains fine particulate matter that infiltrates lungs, aggravating asthma, chronic bronchitis, and heart conditions. Hospitals in regions close to fire zones report surges in patients struggling with respiratory distress. Children, the elderly, and those with pre-existing conditions are particularly vulnerable. The mental health toll is also severe, as trauma from sudden evacuations, the loss of homes, and the constant threat of danger leave lasting psychological scars. Experts emphasize that wildfire recovery must address not only physical rebuilding, but also long-term health care, especially for vulnerable populations whose lives are disproportionately affected. One of the critical elements shaping both the intensity and frequency of these fires is climate. Texas, already a land prone to extremes, is experiencing hotter summers, prolonged droughts, and erratic weather patterns, all of which create the perfect conditions for catastrophic wildfires. Dry vegetation becomes fuel, while strong winds drive flames across vast distances at incredible speeds. Meteorologists and climate scientists point out that what Texas faces today may not be an anomaly, but rather a glimpse of the future under a warming climate. This makes the challenge not just about extinguishing the current fires, but also about preparing for a future in which such disasters may become more common. It raises urgent questions about land management, building practices, emergency preparedness, and even the way communities are planned and constructed in vulnerable regions. As the flames continue to spread and emergency declarations expand, the spotlight inevitably falls on leadership. Governor Abbott's statewide disaster declaration mobilizes state resources, including the Texas Division of Emergency Management and the National Guard, to assist local efforts. Coordination between agencies becomes essential as firefighters, law enforcement, health workers, and volunteers must work seamlessly to protect lives and property. But such crises also spark debates about funding, resource allocation, and political responsibility. Were communities adequately prepared? Was enough done to mitigate risks before disaster struck? These questions echo in public discourse, reminding leaders that trust and accountability are as important as immediate action during emergencies. The outcome of this disaster will influence not only how Texas rebuilds, but also how it prepares for inevitable future challenges. As the Texas wildfires rage on, the conversation shifts from immediate response to the broader implications these disasters carry for the future. It is not just about the homes that have been lost or the communities displaced, but about the lessons learned and the systemic vulnerabilities they expose. In many ways, wildfires act as a stress test on society. They reveal the strengths of emergency systems, the resilience of communities, and the weaknesses that must be addressed. For Texas, a state with vast rural expanses, growing urban centers, and an economy tied deeply to agriculture and energy, the stakes are particularly high. Each fire is more than a blaze to be extinguished. It is a signpost pointing to the challenges ahead in a world where climate and human settlement patterns collide. One critical issue that emerges is the question of preparedness. While Texas has long contended with natural disasters like hurricanes and floods, wildfires on this scale introduce a different set of challenges. Firefighting resources are stretched thin, and many rural counties lack the equipment or manpower to confront large-scale infernos. Volunteer fire departments, the backbone of many small towns, do their best with limited resources. But when faced with walls of fire spanning miles, even the bravest volunteers can only do so much. Investment in firefighting infrastructure, from specialized equipment to advanced training, becomes an urgent topic of debate. Should Texas allocate more of its budget to wildfire preparedness, or is this seen as an anomaly that will fade away? Experts argue that such disasters are no longer rare, and preparing for them is not optional. It is essential. Technology plays a vital role in this conversation. Satellite imagery, drones, and predictive modeling are increasingly used to track wildfire behavior in real time. These tools allow responders to understand where the fire is likely to spread and how weather patterns will influence its path. Yet technology is only as useful as the systems that support it. Rural regions often lack robust communication infrastructure, making it difficult to get timely warnings to residents. Expanding broadband access, strengthening cell towers, and integrating alert systems are critical measures to ensure no community is left in the dark when flames approach. Information can save lives, but only if it reaches the right people at the right time. The digital divide, often discussed in terms of education and economics, is suddenly a matter of survival when disaster strikes. Another pressing theme is land management. Much of Texas consists of vast, undeveloped land where dry brush and dead vegetation accumulate over time. Without controlled burns, clearing, or maintenance, these areas become tinderboxes waiting for a spark. Landowners, environmental agencies, and policymakers face the challenge of balancing preservation with safety. Prescribed burns, though controversial, are a proven method of reducing wildfire risk by eliminating excess fuel. However, they require expertise, careful timing, and community cooperation. Some residents fear prescribed burns will get out of control, while others resist government involvement in how private land is managed. The wildfires bring this debate into sharp focus, reminding everyone that doing nothing often leads to far worse outcomes. Insurance and financial resilience also emerge as major concerns. Homeowners in fire-prone regions face skyrocketing insurance premiums or, in some cases, the inability to secure coverage at all. This creates a vicious cycle where those who can least afford it are left most vulnerable. Businesses struggle with similar issues as insurers weigh the growing risk of catastrophic fires against their bottom lines. Policymakers in Texas and beyond will need to address these gaps, possibly through state-backed insurance pools or incentives for homeowners to adopt fire-resistant construction and landscaping. The economics of resilience, how much it costs to prepare versus how much it costs to rebuild, will increasingly shape the conversation in the years ahead. The fires also highlight the interconnectedness of disasters. Smoke plumes drift across state lines, affecting air quality in distant cities. Supply chain disruptions ripple through the economy as transport routes are closed or businesses destroyed. Power infrastructure, already strained by extreme weather, faces added risk as flames threaten transmission lines and substations. These cascading effects remind us that disasters rarely remain contained to one community or one state. They spread outward, touching lives and industries far beyond the immediate fire zone. For Texans, this means grappling with not only local devastation, but also the broader role the state plays in regional and national stability. When Texas suffers, the country feels it. Amid all these challenges, stories of resilience continue to surface. Families who lost everything are taken in by neighbors. Firefighters, exhausted and soot-covered, push on day after day because they know lives depend on them. Teachers set up temporary classrooms in shelters so children can keep learning despite displacement. Churches organize prayer services and donation drives, offering both material support and spiritual solace. These stories underscore the unyielding spirit of Texans, a spirit that refuses to be broken, even in the face of overwhelming loss. They also serve as a reminder that while disasters test us, they also bring out extraordinary acts of compassion and courage. Looking forward, the Texas wildfires will inevitably become a case study for policymakers, scientists, and community leaders. What went wrong? What worked well? How can the state and the country do better next time? These are the questions that must be asked, not only to honor those who suffered, but also to prevent future tragedies. If ignored, the lessons of today will become the mistakes of tomorrow. If embraced, however, they could pave the way for a stronger, safer, and more resilient Texas. The fires, destructive as they are, may also spark innovation and reform, forcing leaders and citizens alike to rethink how they live with the land, how they prepare for extremes, and how they care for one another in times of crisis. As the final embers of the Texas wildfires continue to smolder, what remains is not just the ash of destroyed homes and scorched land, but the weight of questions about the future. Disasters of this magnitude are more than temporary emergencies. They are inflection points that define how communities, governments, and entire societies will move forward. In Texas, this wildfire crisis has unveiled a stark reality. Preparedness and resilience are not luxuries, they are necessities. The flames have illuminated vulnerabilities in infrastructure, governance, and environmental management, but they have also revealed extraordinary courage and solidarity among everyday people. Now, with the fires slowly contained, the challenge becomes transforming tragedy into meaningful change. The long-term recovery process will be grueling. Families who fled their homes face months, perhaps years of uncertainty. For some, insurance payouts and government aid may provide a lifeline, but others will fall through the cracks, burdened by financial loss and emotional trauma. Rural communities, already grappling with economic hardship, may struggle to rebuild. Schools and businesses will need to restart under difficult conditions, and the land itself will require time and care to heal. As vegetation regrows and ecosystems attempt to recover from the shock of intense flames. Recovery is never simple, never fast, and never complete. What is lost cannot always be restored. But recovery is also where resilience takes root, where new systems can be built stronger than those that came before. The state government, led by Governor Abbott, has emphasized immediate relief and pledged resources for rebuilding. Yet long-term policy will require more than disaster declarations. It will require investment in fire prevention, including controlled burns, improved infrastructure, and stronger emergency systems. Legislators will need to confront difficult questions about land management, building codes, and climate resilience. There will be debate, conflict, and resistance, especially when reforms collide with economic interests or political ideology. But ignoring these issues would be an act of negligence, condemning future generations to relive the same tragedies again and again. To prevent this cycle, Texas and the nation as a whole must act decisively. The wildfires have also reshaped the public's perception of climate change. For years, debates over rising temperatures, drought, and extreme weather have been mired in politics. But when families lose everything to flames fueled by record heat and dryness, the conversation becomes tangible, immediate, and deeply personal. Climate is no longer a distant abstraction. It is the fire at the door. Scientists warn that such events will become more frequent and severe unless emissions are reduced and adaptation strategies are prioritized. Whether Texans accept this reality and push for systemic change will shape the trajectory of not only the state's future, but also the broader national response to climate crises. On the human side, the fires have left scars that cannot be measured in acres or dollars. Survivors carry memories of running through smoke, of watching their homes burn, of fearing they might never return. Firefighters and first responders, many of them volunteers, will live with the physical and emotional toll of their work. Children displaced from their homes will remember the disruption to their lives, the nights spent in shelters, the toys and pets they could not save. Healing these wounds requires more than rebuilding structures. It requires supporting mental health, fostering community solidarity, and ensuring that no one faces recovery alone. The resilience of Texans is strong, but resilience should not be mistaken for invulnerability. Support systems must be put in place to help people carry the burden of trauma long after the flames are gone. There is also a moral dimension to this story. The fires serve as a reminder of society's obligation to protect its most vulnerable members. Low-income families, the elderly, and those in rural communities are disproportionately affected, with fewer resources to escape, rebuild, or adapt. In times of crisis, inequality deepens. Addressing this requires policies that prioritize equity in disaster response, ensuring that aid is not only delivered, but delivered fairly. If disasters expose the cracks in society, then the true measure of recovery lies in whether those cracks are repaired or widened. Despite the devastation, moments of hope shine through. Communities have rallied together, raising funds, collecting supplies, and opening their homes to neighbors. Firefighters from across the state and even from other regions have joined forces, embodying solidarity in action. Volunteers, faith groups, and non-profits have stepped up to provide not just material aid, but also human connection at a time when it is most needed. These acts of kindness remind us that while fire destroys, compassion builds. And it is in these small, countless gestures that the spirit of Texas truly reveals itself, unyielding, generous, and unbreakable. The Texas wildfires will be studied for years to come. They will appear in scientific journals, government reports, and news archives as a defining event of this decade. But beyond the statistics and analysis, what will endure are the stories of those who lived through it. The farmers who lost their fields, the children who clutched their parents' hands as they evacuated, the firefighters who stood against the inferno with only water and determination. These stories remind us that disasters are not only about destruction, but also about humanity. The choices we make, the values we uphold, and the futures we strive to create. And so, as we close this chapter, the question remains, what will we do with what we have learned? Will Texas and the nation use this tragedy as a catalyst for building stronger, safer, and more resilient systems? Or will the lessons fade with the smoke, leaving communities vulnerable once again? The answer lies not in the fire itself, but in our collective response. Disasters test us, but they also give us a chance to grow. Before we end, we invite you to take part in this conversation. If you believe stories like this matter, if you believe it is important to shine a light on crises that shape lives and futures, please subscribe to Crisis Lens. Your support allows us to keep producing in-depth reporting and analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Don't forget to like this video, It helps more people discover the truth behind these disasters. And most importantly, share this video with friends, family, or colleagues so that together we can raise awareness and drive meaningful change. The fires in Texas are not just a local story. They are a warning, a lesson, and a call to action for all of us.